But wait, okay, hold on, let's pump the brakes. Before we wrap this up, before we leave the shading controller behind, what did we actually learn in this section? What was new in this section? Not a lot, admittedly, right? We learned the call after, the simple timer. That was new for you, but most of this was stuff that you already knew. You know how to do flow control, you know how to do if-then statements, you know how to do the functions, all of this. It's good muscle memory, for sure. We're glad that you did it for that reason. The more you do these things, the more you get into your bones about how to do it. That's great. But if there's anything I really want you to walk away from on this topic, it's what I'm going to talk about in the next couple of minutes. So turn your mind into a sponge and let your pores be filled with my words. That got weird, but I'm going with it. We're keeping it. So we, so far, are giving you tools. Hopefully you have figured this out by now, that the point of this course is not to just show you how to control this shade controller and this lighting controller. That's not the point. That's not very useful. That's only useful if you happen to be working with exactly these devices in the real world, which you won't be because these are emulated devices in the first place. The point is that we're actually giving you tools. The point is we want to give you and empower you with the knowledge of how to accomplish tasks for whatever you may come across in the real world, knowing that you have the tools available inside the software and you can troubleshoot on your own since you know how to work around that. That's good. We want that. That is point number one. Point number two we want you to walk away with is to start to think more like a coder, to be anticipating and designing your script in such a way that it is going to be useful for more coders down the line as well, for people to look at. If I look at our script right now, I'm going to bring this up a little bit higher. This script that we've written so far for our shade control is pretty simple, it's pretty straightforward, but it's also written like a human. It's written the way that a human thinks. If you read through it, it says, okay, when the button up is pressed, then we're going to disable the buttons and do the thing, and then we're going to wait a couple of seconds and we're going to turn these back on. It's parsed out the same way that you would tell your friend what it is that you're doing. That is the natural way of things when you are first writing your code. It's part of the reason why we put all those comments in there, so that you can talk your way through it and explain what you're doing at every step. The first time you write any bit of scripting, that's what it's going to look like. You're going to be walking through it, putting in the pieces, and making sure that it's functional the way that it makes sense for you as a human with a human brain doing human things. Good job, human, you did it. But part of the coding process is then once you've done it once, stop, look back at it, and see if you can alter that script so that it's a bit more efficient. Perhaps it thinks in a better way. It's a little bit more truncated and concise. Are there things in this script that we could improve so that it isn't this big, long, kind of difficult mess to read? Well, let's look at this. In each of these event handlers, what are we doing? We're hitting the button and then we're calling after a certain amount of time, we're resetting the relays. On this one, after a certain amount of time, we're resetting different relays and different buttons. Why don't we just consolidate that? Why do we have 3 different event handlers that are doing these 3 different call afters when the call afters are all essentially doing the same thing? They're resetting the system after X number of seconds, right? Maybe we should get rid of all that. We already have a function that is disabling the buttons up and down, and then after our X number of time, we're resetting some things. Why don't we have it reset everything? So we are turning the disableds back on. Why don't we also make sure that the button up Boolean is set back to false, and the button down Boolean is set to false, and the relay up is set to false, and the relay down is set to false. We'll have it do all those things because no matter which button you're pressing, you know that after X seconds, you want to reset the whole thing. So let's do that. By the way, if I haven't shown you this before, this is a very good little trick. If you ever start, re-editing your blocks and you see they start piling up on each other and you're doing that thing where you're constantly moving your blocks around, go up here and just hit the hamburger sign and do arrange. It just magically gets everything back in order. Anyways, back to the point. So here we are going to reset the buttons, reset the relays after our X seconds. That means that we don't need to do that here, do we? We don't need to do it here. We don't need to do it here because it's part of this disable function. Okay, looking good so far. How else could we clean this up? Well, now that I'm looking at my script and I know what the end result is going to be, do I really need my if conditional statements? We started this by saying, hey, when the button is pressed on, we want it to do something. But now that we've gone through our entire script, there's no possibility of the user ever turning it off, is there? Because we have disabled the button while it's in that on state, right? And when it comes back, it's already in the off state. The only way they can ever interact with this is to turn the button on by pressing it. So we don't really need to analyze whether the button's on in these if statements. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't keep that. It might be a good idea. It doesn't hurt the script to have it there. You're kind of covering your own butt by making sure you're only doing it in the right case. But we could still simplify this. We could pull this out of here and kill the conditional statement and just drop this back right into the main. We could do the same thing here, kill the conditional statements. Same thing here, kill the conditional statements. And already this is getting to be a lot more tight. Now each of our event handlers, in fact, I'm just going to put the thing it does that's most important at the very top, and then it just runs some functions. Put the thing at the top and run some functions. That's sort of the ideal world that it would always be good to aim for when you're writing code. An event handler shouldn't be ugly to look at. The best event handlers in the world are those that are just recalling functions. And what's also lovely about that is you're hiding all of the ugly code later down in the actual functions. The stuff where it's literally doing the work of turn this on and turn that off, that's all ugly code. That's hidden around down here. In our event handlers, it's just saying, that's the function I'm going to do. That's the next function I'm going to do. Real easy to read. And in fact, it's now so easy to read, I don't need my comments anymore because the functions have nice descriptive names that tell me what they do, so those comments aren't as necessary for that next person down the line. Now this, look at that. I have cleaned up those 3 event handlers into something that is very tight, very easy to understand, partially because it is so tight now, and the next person who's reading my script won't have a problem going through it. The functionality has not changed. Everything will work the same as it did before. I've still got my up, down, and my stop. It's still disabling everything, recalling everything after 2 seconds. But the script itself is so much nicer than how we left it 2 minutes ago, right? We've got just some nice, succinct event handlers, and these event handlers are just recalling our functions. And that is what we want you to start thinking like. This is not reading the way a human reads, but this is reading the way a coder reads. So as you move forward, as you go forward both in the block controller or in Lua class later on, we'll talk about this in the advanced class, start thinking like a coder and stop thinking like a human, which is also just good advice in life in general. All right, let's leave this one behind. We'll see you in the next section where we'll take on the lighting controller.